Welcome back. I am so pleased to have with me a guest who I've never actually met in person, but I feel is like a sister already. I've had 2 aborted trips to the Northeast to actually meet in person, but I'm thrilled to introduce to you Sonja Foster-Storch, also Sonny is her nickname. And Sonny is a keen personality in the healthcare marketing space, truly a warhorse, probably been involved in a launch of dozens, probably 20% of the brands in America at some point. Certainly a lot of the blockbusters that we're all familiar with. On the ad agency side, she's a Madison Avenue person. She's run the agency, run Ragged, doing the 100-hour-a-week commute to the city, and now she's gotten involved in a really, really wonderful area. And this is a very special interview because today is the last day of Pride Month, and Sonny has also become one of my mentors and guides in this space of diversity, equity, inclusion. So we're going to talk about 2 things today. We're going to talk about nurse practitioners and physicians associates, which is part of the healthcare system that many of us kind of know about, but we really don't know a lot about it. And we're going to talk and dive deep into that because Sonny's new gig with Point of Care Network is a really neat company. And the more I've learned about this space, the more excited I get. So Sonny, could you take a minute, help us understand the whole landscape of NPs and PAs, historically the role that NPs and PAs have taken in healthcare, and how it's morphing and how it's changing and how they're becoming a much more prominent role in our healthcare system and things we should know about this space.
Love it. I'm so happy to be here. So first of all, TGIF, and as you said, last Friday of the month, last day of Pride, of which I'm very, very excited about, having a wife of 29 years, which in and of itself, and actually in gay years, that's like 100. So I'm very excited and proud about that. And also, I have to tell you, Dan, you and your colleagues to have me on it to talk about this gets me so excited. After 38 years in the business, and you gave a nod to my starting on Madison Avenue and working my way through and discovering healthcare advertising, formerly known as pharmaceutical advertising, about 35 years ago. The changes have been vast. And most recently, I joined, as you said, POCN, Point of Care Network. And we have sort of a bifurcated goal that we work toward at POCN. The first one is to connect and work with nurse practitioners and physician associates. So we sort of look at ourselves as, I always love to compare and contrast brands. So we are like the LinkedIn for NPs and PAs, many of whom, by the way, are excellent business people also on LinkedIn. But for us, we wanted to form something that is solely dedicated to NPs and PAs. So nurse practitioners and physician associates, formerly known as physician, assistants, excuse me. And they're really trying to get to that moniker of physician associate. It's not formal yet. And it's more about taking away that word assistant, which has a lot of great connotations, but also sort of takes away that leadership part of what they do. So physician associate has become the more appreciated lexicon for them. And they're working toward that formally, as well as actually other discussions about should they even be called something else. So like everything in life, it's not that easy. So I like to put things in threes, and I made a couple lists to make sure that I hit them with you. So NPs and PAs have 3 critical similarities, and they're both licensed healthcare providers, and they work alongside physicians. Some of them are often tapped into for recommendations, for help with diagnoses. Until I joined POCN, I was never realizing that all of my primary healthcare providers, with an exception of my OBGYN, have been nurse practitioners and physician associates. That's because I always loved the way they worked with me. They take a tremendous amount of time. If you have any, I believe you have a PA or an NP as well. They spend so much time with you. And the other interesting thing about NPs and PAs is there are about 830,000 in the United States where NPs and PAs predominantly reside. 87% of them are female. It's interesting to me. Is that why they're more caring and take more time? I don't know. I have a lot of very wonderful male friends as well who take a lot of time with me, but I find that interesting. So they both work alongside physicians. They both diagnose and treat illnesses. And importantly, they both prescribe. And I can't help but have a conversation with you, Dan, where I'm always talking about how something relates to the business of people who are patients and the business of pharma, because writing scripts directly impacts many, many small to mid-sized to large pharma companies, as you know. So they are prescribers. They prescribe approximately 32% of all the scripts written last year in the United States, 32% were written by NPs and PAs. So take the fact that a third of them are often prescribing a drug. However, they are often not a single point of contact for a rep or for pharma companies to focus on. So we have some awesome partners within pharma who have recognized that. And since the inception of our company 9 years ago, so next year will be our decade anniversary, which is huge in any business. And Richard Zwickel, who's the founding member of POCN, is constantly hitting us with the third, that a third of these scripts are written by these folks. They both have to require a graduate degree, clinical training, and board certifications. Now, NPs need about 600 hours of clinical training. PAs need about 2,000. So generally, an NP will get through her or his training in 12 to 18 months, PAs 18 to 24 to 30 months. So it really depends on the program. And a lot of these programs too that are entering universities and medical colleges are constantly reassessing and evolving what their NP and PA certifications look like. And the NPs and PAs are very, very involved in that as well, because they want to bring that same level of personalized service and beyond. And they take a lot of pride in that time that they take with patients.
The thing to me that's striking is not just the number of prescriptions written by NPs and PAs, but the trajectory. I think you told me that's more than half of prescriptions.
Yes. Yeah. So
that's the truth, and that's in a very short period of time.
Correct.
Written not by doctors, physicians, by MDs or DOs,
right,
but NPs and PAs, and it is totally overlooked by our colleagues in the pharma market.
It is. And we have a couple clients with whom we're presently working who recognize that. And really the only two areas that you generally do not find NPs and PAs are podiatry and ophthalmology. For whatever reason, I think there are varying degrees of interest there. And again, I joined this company 90 days ago yesterday. So I'm about to make my 100th day impact next week, but I'm still learning so much about them. And every time I'm on a call, one of my strategists or one of my sales folks says, okay, Sonny, actually, this is how current this is. They write about a third of the scripts and almost a half in many, many other in cardiology. They are very, very involved in psychiatry, which has also been personally, I have referred a number of folks in this area. I'm in the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, as we call it. And we have a lot of interest in the psychiatry part here too, as POCN, because the mind impacts the body and the body impacts the mind.
Well, the field of psychiatry specifically has evolved over the last 20 years to just no therapy, but just writing drugs. And I think what NPs are trained to do is to actually listen. Listen,
and then they talk, and then they listen again. It's been amazing. And at POCN, we sort of have two areas, if you will. One is connecting NPs and PAs to each other, utilizing them as key opinion leaders. We work with healthcare associations. Often they'll even help to train some of the sales representatives. It's very different speaking with an NP and PA. It's like any of your audiences, Dan. It's all about the conversation has to be relevant and something that we hope moves our business and our clients' businesses. The other side of our business is key opinion leader development in terms of reaching out to patients, going to association meetings. We provide a lot of data to I'll call them our pharma clients. So we have a database that is equal to or can surpass some of the larger ones. The difference with us is we have a ton of first party data. So we have contact information, we have inferred specialty, which means that when scripts comes through, a lot of time in a pharmacy, the first name that's on the script gets entered. So it is attributed to that writer, generally an MD or a DO, right? So we help, and we have certain ways of looking at the data to determine where down along that line or across that line was actually written. So the inferred specialty is very important. And when we share that data with our clients who didn't realize a third of their scripts on average are getting written by an MP or a PA, it's an entire different decile that we try to hit for them. So providing data is a very big part of our business, as well as connecting clients to these KOLs that I just talked to you about. And I'll tell you, the reps have learned, they themselves have learned. And when a pharma client calls you, and remember, like you alluded to, I helped to launch the initial biggest blockbuster in the world, which was atorvastatin Lipitor. Exceptional branding, by the way, done by us, but still being written off the charts as a statin, a leading statin between Lipitor and Crestor. But the fascinating thing is NPs and PAs are constantly looking for education. So what's happened since the last 24 years since that was launched? What's happening in, let's go back to psychiatry. What's happening there that we can help patients with? And importantly, their care partners. And I don't always say caregivers, because a lot of folks, their spouses, their children, their parents, their best friend is part of their caregiving. Right. So we like to provide information to care partners as well. And importantly, again, always figuring out how we can get MPs and PAs to connect with each other. And many of them, as we're in 27 states, they can write independently. Okay.
Without a physician. They don't need a physician.
Correct.
They can sit in an office and you can
correct.
come in and
so they'll have their own practice.
Accelerating as well in many states as well. They're seeing the wisdom of that, especially in what I like to refer to the square states, the rural states.
yes, which is actually where most of those 27 states are. And there are a couple websites you can get on. USA.edu has a great website about NPs and PAs, red, yellow, green, a lot of green up here, some yellow here, and red not yet. So there's a lot of work being toward, again, those nurse practitioners and physician associates having a critical role in patient care. I think the differences too, I talked to you about some of the hours differences and the schooling. NPs have specialty fields. They tend to work very, very closely with physicians in specific specialties. The PA, they tend to be a little more broad in their medical education. And while they are in school longer, I think that also helps them to take on some different interests. And the other thing that's been fascinating for me is watching how NPs and PAs, they work so beautifully together. It's like, if you've ever seen crew and everybody's rowing in the same direction with the same pace and the same rhythm, they work so beautifully together and complement each other, as well as being involved in a lot of psychiatry offices because of the way that they care.
Everything in modern America, we lost internet access in the middle of that question. So that's all of a sudden your background changed. So don't be confused, everybody. I'm going to pose the question one more time. The way we've marketed to physicians, Sonny, has been very specific and very much targeted in a certain way. And from what I know about NPs and PAs, all those rules are really out the window. The messaging, the approach we take. I love the whole idea of community, because I think NPs and PAs are probably much more attuned to the idea of community and KOLs. But help us understand how different they are from marketing to physicians.
Yeah. So Dan, great question. And I know I have a little bit of change of venue, had to go inside because I lost Wi-Fi. So apologies. But so I love that you bring this up, because we have spent decades and decades centering on the physicians, and that healthcare provider has now changed dramatically because they're NPs, they're PAs. It's not just an MD and a DO, to your point. So I think where in the beginning, and I'll go back to my days back in Lipitor, when we focused in the middle of that circle was the physician. Well, the physician's not the end user, right? It's the patient and it's the person and it's their care partners. So we took from talking to their heads to the MPs and PAs where we truly talk to their hearts. They are patient people focused. And I love it. And when you talk to them, they often will tell us we do run late in almost all of our exams and all of our patient visits and appointments, but we always give that same allotted amount of time to the next person who comes in. Now, is that ideal if you're the one sitting in the waiting room? No, but I'll tell you, have an NP or a PA for 20 plus years as my own personal provider, I always get that time with her. And she goes out of her way to ensure that, to truly listen. And you can tell when someone's, taking notes, which everyone has to do out now for EHRs and for part of their practice and for legal reasons. I understand that. I appreciate so much the PAs and the MPs in particular, who I have noticed take a very, very specific time out of in addition to the appointment itself. How are you? What's going in on in your life, so that they can really determine, is it a prescription that's needed, or is it a handwritten prescription, or is it a prescription of you need to take better care of yourself? And they want to get into
really a whole person approach to healthcare rather than symptomatic approach. Okay.
Head to foot, 100%, inside and out. And I've had my own MPs and PAs when my own wife was struggling and we almost lost her from COVID 3+ years ago. She saw it in my face the second I went into the office. And it's that level of understanding a patient. And again, I love MDs and DOs. They have changed, especially here in the States, how we treat patients. It is not aside from them, it is in addition to them that these NPs and PAs want to be at their side, or as I've said before, in their own practices. So it's a very, very patient-centric approach. And you'll never hear from an MP or a PA, I don't want more education. I don't need to know about that. They're constantly going like this. They say to our founder.
That I think speaks to the sense of community and why the KOL strategy is such an important cornerstone of what you're trying to do.
It is. And I'll tell you, the opinion leaders that we have pulled from the NP and PA community, and that also part of that community is they work very closely with pharmacists to understand the impact of prescriptions. There is a lot of education that goes on with AANP and AAPA, which are their respective associations. A lot of involvement there, and they flock to these annual meetings where we are also involved in, because that's where we gather what's happening today, what happened yesterday, and where do you want to go next month as an MP or a PA. So again, that connectivity of community, communication, and education is imperative as we work with NPs and PAs.
Let's transition, since we're having such an amazing conversation, because it is Pride Month. It's the last day of Pride Month. And as I said at the beginning of this interview, you've been very much a mentor and a guidepost for me since we've met. And help us understand the role of Pride Month and how it's changed. And I think back to when you got married 28, 29 years ago, and you said it out loud probably to people, and their jaws probably hit the ground. Help us understand how society has changed and where you think it's going. We'll circle it back to healthcare and NPs and PAs, but specifically diversity, equity, inclusion in the healthcare space. Why is it getting so much resonance and so much traction? To me, it seems very recently, but if you look at it in the last 30 years since you've been married, it's like night and day.
Yeah, Dan. So love that you brought this up. And to be clear, I know we both have a hard stop in 26 minutes, but I could go on for forever about this. So we're going to do this again next year, same time. So first of all, thanks for bringing it up. The part about pride that I really want people to understand, for people like me who I didn't come out until I was in college. And even then, coming out was a very, very different process. We did not wear these pride bracelets like I'm wearing. It was, you found your circle of trust and you stayed within them. Now, for someone like me who's social, who's a very, very big empath, and I feel people's pain, I also want to take people's pain away. I've had what you just said about being a mentor to you and someone with whom you can speak means so much to me, because I'm also always trying to educate people. And with yesterday's decision, this is not a political discussion by the Supreme Court to give the thumbs down to certain populations who have absolutely been helped. When you look at affirmative action, there's a reason we need it. There's a reason. We are not all raised the same way, with a mom and a dad and endless amounts of money. And we have to take into consideration that people don't always get the same head start or get the same start as many of us. So the pride part for me that comes in with LGBTQIA plus is, and I love a good acronym, by the way, but it's getting a little lengthy. So is, for me, being a pillar of the community for my children, for my wife. And by the way, when you say, yes, we got married, got together 29 years ago, got married 25 years ago in New York City. Remember, it was a commitment celebration. It wasn't a wedding. We've only been legally bound for 4 or 5 years. Now, having said that, we've been married or licensed in about 5 states. You know how most families go, like their summer vacation is visiting a capital in the United States or another part of the world. Ours was, let's get married. We need paperwork. We have to protect our 3 children. And so technically, and the other thing about gay folks is that we have many, many anniversaries. It's not just when we met, when we kissed, when we bought our first car together, when we, of course, got our first puppy and our first kitten and anything else we rescued. It's about when there were these monumental decisions. So in 2004, my parents came and watched our children, who at the time were 2 and 3.5, 2 and 3.5. And Dara and I drove through the night to Provincetown so we could get married in the eyes of the law. It was the most phenomenal 48 hours. And you have to understand, my parents at the time, we don't understand it. All we know is you're happy and we love you. And we've had the fortune, amazing fortune of people that have been in our lives to support us. Now, have we encountered issues with people not understanding who we are? I'm sure we have. I choose not to see it and not to listen, because I live my life in honesty and with love and with helping people who I want to help, and I want you to help me. That's how I live. It's all about my mom, especially, both of my parents. My mother taught me, you love to love. It does. If she could back in the day, she would have said love is love is love, but she wasn't, she was a chain smoker who used to just say, it doesn't matter, Sonja, so I appreciated that. But with pride, and particularly in the healthcare system, it's not as it was as bad as the late 80s with HIV/AIDS, where mostly men were turned down for treatment and had doors shut in their face from their parents and their siblings. However, there are still very, very clear incidences of people who identify as LGBTQ+, who do not receive the treatment that we need. A lot of them do not get the annual visits that they should, which has been shown to extend life, and by identifying things earlier. So the other thing that with NPs and PAs that I have found, as I've spoken to many of them during Pride Month, is it's all about your heart. We want to take care of you. They don't say, though, we don't care who you love, because that also can be dismissive. People should care. And when people say, I don't care what you do, well, you should. And I've taught this to my children from the second they could understand. You go to companies and to clients and to family members who celebrate who you are. You go where you are celebrated, not tolerated. The word tolerate makes my skin crawl. I love people and embrace them for who they are. And I've said this to you before. I may not always appreciate people's politics or opinions, but I respect them. Doesn't mean I have to respect them, but they'll never know, because I treat people fairly. And the old adage of you reflect mostly the 5 people with whom you spent the most time together. And that's my wife, my 3 kids, and my best friend. And I love that. And that reflection is in my children, it's in my partner. And I feel like the whole pride, where people say, DE&I is kind of fading. I love what you just said, that it's still so out there. We can't let it fade, because diversity and equity and inclusion makes for better countries. It makes for better companies. It makes for better treatment, because all of our healthcare providers or allied health professionals need to know people and who they stand for, so that they're getting the appropriate treatment.
and they're getting access to treatment. And
It's also a matter of science and
Right.
math, I like to say, because let's take clinical trials, for example. We do a lot of work in clinical trial recruiting in our business. And one of the things I've become attuned to that I just really honestly wasn't aware of is, think sickle cell anemia, right? That's part of the African American community.
Yes.
No white people have sickle cell anemia.
Yes.
Well, you have to have diversity in a clinical trial. You're not going to be able to know that a person with sickle cell anemia has an adverse reaction.
Right.
And
so Dan, it's so important. And also in cardiovascular trials where it's been proven that African Americans have a different responses to ACEs and ARBs than Caucasians, if you will. So I think I came from Syneos, where I was for 5+ years, who allowed me to kick off the whole Pride LGBTQ plus DE&I thing that I helped to start with Michelle Keefe and the other leaders. And I'll tell you that the more you talk about things like this, you impact people who before never even spoke to you. And I've even had people say to me, you don't know me, but you need to know that I heard your words. And imagine how powerful that is for 30, 40-year-old guy comes into my office at that age, not feeling embraced by his or her family or their colleagues. So I shout it from the rooftops. I again, respect everyone's opinions, and love is love is love. It's so easy to figure out. And that factors into medicine. It factors into community. And I'll say it again, you have to be part of something where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And Dan, you have along the way too. And it is funny that you and I have not physically ever met. It's bizarre, but thank you, COVID. But your embracing of understanding the DE&I factors about everything that you and I touch in the healthcare field, as well as your colleague, Marshall, who has embraced all of this, makes me say, I always want to, it's like I work a little extra hard for you because you care so much about me and our community. And it means so much to so many people who we're not even
Sonja, I come from a marginalized community as well. I'm part of the Jewish community. So
Right.
we're less than 2% of the US population.
Right.
So I grew up experiencing being other, being discriminated against, being beat up for being Jewish, just for being born. You can't control who your parents are.
Right. You can't. And I'll tell you, as a woo, a wannabe Jew, because I'm married to a Jew and our 3 children are Jewish, I have such a deep appreciation as I have sat with my in-laws. And when she was here, Dara's grandmother, who passed at 99, to hear the stories and, packed up one bag and moved across the mountains to get to another part of the world to live. And that marginalization, which happens all across medicine, has to stop.
People need to feel safe. And at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do.
Right.
With DE&I is everybody should feel safe. They should feel
Right.
safe at home. They should feel safe at work. They should feel safe at the grocery store. They should feel safe
Right.
at the mall. They should feel safe at school.
Right.
And that should be our aspiration. And certain of those things we can control, and certain things, obviously, like guns and violence, we feel like we have no control.
Correct. You're
How we treat other people, absolutely. I think it's biodiversity is what scientists talk about. We need to have biodiversity to save our planet. We can't have one crop. How boring would our world be if we just had white men?
Right. Well, for me, that would be particularly boring. I'm kidding. But I think also you just said it
Me too, by the way.
See, you're an honorary. So I think also that I love that one crop analogy, because the other thing about having one crop, let's say it's corn, you know how many people are allergic to corn? So now what happens? We keep taking down the population. So there are reasons that we have more than one type of antihypertensive, one brand of statin. Everything's a little bit different, which is why it's trademarked. So I think embracing diversity goes so far beyond skin color and how people look, because our bodies respond differently.
It's science and math.
Yes, it's science and math. You said it. You say it all the time. And I love that. It's science and math. And you always talk about, I'm looking at your screensaver too, with problem solvers and solution providers. We're all in this together. And to go back to that community, when you have a community of caregivers who can, and care providers who can write scripts and independently see patients in a different light than MDs and DOs, it makes everybody richer. And by the way, richer in caring. And by the way, is going to keep a lot more people alive.
Yes. Yeah. At the end of the day, patient outcomes will improve. And
Right.
that's really what we're here for. That's why, NPs, PAs, physicians get into this world of medicine. And that's why we get into the space. We get into the space because we want to make a difference.
And it does.
That's really what it's about.
And you have made a difference. And I think also, Dan, when you look at the past, I think the last readout was the end of 2021, but there has been an increase of about 4% year over year of MDs and DOs entering the medical world. There has been an increase in double digits from 11 to 27%, depending on the specialty, for NPs and PAs. So again, numbers and science, it's where we're going, folks. And you got a third of the people writing that script. If they're not part of your marketing plan, if they're not part of your target to get into our business speak, you are missing out. Now, I'm not just talking about the business of it. Patients are missing out on the care and the treatment that they can receive.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. It brings us back to our roots in the early days of this stuff. It's kind of fun,
Right?
And it's a lot of different challenges. We go back to the old dinner meetings and the steak houses.
Right.
This is a very different approach. This
Yes.
is actually why we got into this business.
100%. I think also, and when you go back to those steakhouses and the launch meetings and everything, we learned so much from it. I miss parts of it. I miss the swag, frankly. I used to make, physicians, the great hats and the pens and the shirts. But I will tell you, sitting around the table with these NPs and PAs and having such a hearty discussion about their appreciation of their predecessors, the MDs and the DOs, who got them interested in this. They
Right.
work so well together. So as the
Right.
rest of the states, the other 23 follow suit, it will continue to make a difference. And I want to thank you too, again, Dan, with you and Marshall and your team, and Carrie, who no one will see or hear on this podcast, who helped me get online twice and has helped to arrange all this and prep me. It's all about partnership, and we're going to help make each other better.
Agreed. Sonny, this has been an absolute joy. I could go all day, but we have hard stops and we have jobs to do.
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about these two very, very important subjects. They dovetail much nicer than I ever imagined, honestly.
Yes.
And you're in a really neat place to be. And thank you so much for being my mentor and NPs, PAs, and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Dan, thank you. And thank you to your team. And I can't wait to meet you live. And you
That's right.
You owe me a hug.
I do. I owe you. You owe me a hug too.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you to Carrie and the other unknown heroes.